Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Easy English podcast. Today we are talking about a skill that's super useful but not always easy. How to argue in English. So I'm Oliver, and let's see today how we can better argue and deliver our point in English. Now, I'm not talking about fighting or yelling, for example, shouting at someone. I mean having a discussion, sharing your opinion, and handling or dealing with disagreements calmly and clearly. Does this sound interesting? Let's go. So why is it important to know how you can properly argue and get your point across, we would say, in English? Well, it's not just about winning an argument. Sometimes you just need to be able to explain your point of view, your opinion, or even maybe you just need to try to solve a small disagreement with a friend or a co-worker. Knowing the correct or the right words can make a big difference. And don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. Okay, so the first tip before we actually learn some phrases is to stay calm. Especially now that you're speaking in English, you want to stay calm and appear confident. The second is, of course, to listen first. A good argument is really not about talking. It's about listening to what the other person is saying and then figuring out how to explain your point of view properly too. The third tip, of course, be polite and respectful. And we'll look at some phrases now which will help you to do all three of these. So, sometimes I get people asking me, how do I better say this phrase? And often when we talk about our opinion, we will use the phrase I think. But there are so many other ways to say this. So, of course, to share your opinion, you can say I think. But you can also say, in my opinion, or one that I like is from my perspective. From my perspective. I think that is a nice, soft way to express what you think. And it sounds a bit more advanced than I think. As well as from my perspective, you can also say from my point of view. And that just means in my opinion as well. You're sharing your opinion. But what if you want to maybe express that you don't agree? Well, a good way, instead of saying that's wrong or you're not right, a nicer way to express that would be, for example, I understand your point, but, and then say what you think. So you're telling that person that you have heard what they say, and you're listening to what they say, and then you tell them what you think. Another way to say this would be, I see where you're coming from, but I feel that, and then give your point. Or if you want to disagree politely but more directly, you can say, I'm not sure I agree with that. So it's giving that direct approach of saying you don't really agree. And what phrases can we use if we agree with someone a little bit? So maybe we agree with what they've said, but don't think that it's entirely correct. We can say, that's a good point, but, or we could say, I agree with you to some extent. However, and then we say our point. So those are just a few phrases that you can use to agree or disagree. And sometimes if you can't come to an agreement and you both disagree, which happens a lot of times in arguments, you can say this phrase, let's agree to disagree. It means, yeah, we both think differently, and that's okay. And we will both probably still think differently. And at least you've expressed what you think, and the other person knows. Okay, so now that you know some phrases, how do I recommend practicing arguing or arguments? Well, often when I'm talking about an argument here, I mean a debate. So when there are two different sets of ideas. And one of the best ways to practice is to watch debates or even interviews in English. And this will show you how people share their opinions and disagree with each other without being very rude or maybe abrupt. You can also, of course, practice with friends or family, maybe someone else who is studying English. And to do so, you can pick a fun topic, something not too serious. Like, for example, which is better, Android or iPhone? Or what do you like more, Coca-Cola or Pepsi? Topics like that, which are not so serious, but make for a good practice. Practice makes perfect. And I'm sure that you will develop the skill to argue effectively in English the more you do it. Okay, so you might be wondering, how can I structure my argument? Now that you've got some phrases and tips, when we build an argument, we can use the PREP method in English. And this is an acronym. An acronym is a word where each letter stands for another word. So PREP, it stands for point, reason, example, and point. And this is something that you can use for making your arguments. So the point is the claim. That means what you think, the argument. You want to say your main point and what you think. For example, I think pizza is the best food. Then the second part is the reason. So PREP, point, reason. And that is why you think it. So you can say, because I think that pizza is the tastiest food in the world. And then you want to give an example. So PREP, point, reason, examples. So you'll give one or more example to support your main point and the reasons. For example, maybe you could say that in a study, 60% of people said that pizza was the tastiest food in the world. And then finally, the last part of the process is a point again. So you want to conclude and show how your examples and reasons prove that initial point. You're really re-saying that first point to help the other person remember it now that they know the evidence, the reasons, and the examples. So hopefully that helps you with building an argument, and some of those phrases before can also help you to practice and build sentences. But of course, we get better from practicing in real life. And it's good to do some of these role plays or scenarios if you have a study partner, or even do them in your head. Make arguments in your mind and practice that way. It can be useful too. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Easy English podcast. Like the video if you enjoyed, and remember to subscribe if you're new. And don't forget to check out one of our many other episodes. Have a lovely day and goodbye.